Department, and that is the guidance that you're getting and that they're giving to their citizens, that people should not be out on the roads right now, that they should be staying inside, hunkering down as these bands from this storm continue to hit this area. Now, one other thing that we're seeing is when you go about 60 miles up north of Charleston, that's really where you're seeing the true effects of that storm surge. You're seeing some of the piers collapsing, flooding that one police official described as catastrophic. So in this entire area, there is concern as we're getting these rain bands and as these wind bands continue. Also, the wind leading to power outages. We heard from county officials here that about 70,000 people, just short of 70,000 people, are without power. That was about 45 minutes or so ago. So he said that number is expected to rise in the next couple of hours. So you're dealing with tens of thousands of people without power, that flooding risk as we just went through a high tide, and also the consistent wind and rain as you see in the Charleston area. Again, prone to flooding, but they say they're ready, and they're telling people to hunker down as the conditions continue.
They call it the Low Country for a reason. Shaq Brewster, thank you very much. And still ahead, what it looks like right now in Fort Myers, Florida. We are on the ground with the Cajun Navy as it looks for survivors. Also, Sanibel Island is completely cut off. We're going to show you what it's taking to get people off the island and emergency crews on it. And later on, the storms are getting stronger, but we are not willing to move. What the future looks like for beach towns.
Think he's posting about all that ancient Roman coinage? He sees it.
It appears that Ian has finally landed again. Some say it's the fourth time. I don't know about the fourth time, but
You were a contractor, or
they're giving the west coast and then the east coast, and then supposedly it must have bounced up towards Jacksonville and bounced back into the Atlantic, and then now it's going back into it again. So there's going to be extensive damage all up and down the coast, just pertaining to high tide and the extreme wave activity that goes along with this, in addition to the flooding that goes along with this.
a non-military employee who...
Sad. You pay a very dear cost whenever you live out there
They
in
left
these
their
areas.
houses and they came back to nothing.
I got a friend that lives right on the Johnson River. I think it's called the Johnson River. Maybe called something else, but it's right there in Palaca. He was one of our estimators there at Wilson Chevrolet Garage. His name is Larry, and had a nice little spot, a little off from the cove. Had his own pier, had his sailboat, had a pier with a top over it, with running water and electricity, which is good. That usually goes down below the house, give or take about 150, 200, maybe 300 feet. But he had a nice little setup. But he was within his house itself was probably within 40 feet of the water's edge, right there off of Palaca, Florida, where Billy Graham basically raised up as a young child. I've tried to get a hold of him a couple different times, and I don't get no answer. Of course, he may be having the same type of trouble up that way, pertaining to the house being flooded and all the electronics in the house being wrecked. Maybe the cell phone is down. I don't know. But anyways, I got another friend that lives in just north of north of north of St. Augustine, south of Jacksonville, Florida. He's probably within a half mile of the bay, right there by the airport, pretty close to the interstate, probably about a mile from the interstate. And I talked to him whenever the hurricane was first hitting, and we said something about the prime real estate. being being primed being around in the area where the hurricane first took on its initial blow. And his reply was they did have prime real estate, indicating that he'd been living in Florida enough and seen enough hurricanes to know what the devastation is and was going to be after a Category 4, almost a Category 5, come into that area. Got a friend right here within 5 miles of where I live. She's got a mother that lives down at Naples in a condominium. I think it's probably about, the way I understand, about 3 to 5 miles away from the actual coastlining area. I haven't heard yet if her condominium got any damage, but I do know that she lived on the bottom floor, and I do know that she was not on stilts. So you're going to have lots of people that's going to receive lots of sustaining water damage that is going to just absolutely turn their lives completely, totally upside down. And it's so sad to see so many people be devastated that way simply because of the climate deniers that that, as far as I'm concerned, still hasn't done a full 180-degree turn in admitting that they was wrong, and how that they have misguided and misled not only the American people, but they have misguided and misled the world, beginning right here in Northwest Tennessee, in Obion County and Weakley County, in a little town called Kenton, Tennessee, Martin, Tennessee, Dresden, Tennessee, and the surrounding areas. I guess they think that this is a joke, maybe, or that they're not or should not be held responsible or accountable because of what they didn't do that this ministry should have done, not me, but this ministry should have done beginning in 1989. But instead they frowned, they laughed, they sniggered, they rebelled, they badmouthed me, they demonized me, they dehumanized me. Because whenever I say that I've been put out on a limb right here in Northwest Tennessee, with this being the core of origin, I truly believe, first of all, that my daddy would not have responded to the Kentucky authorities towards putting me on the radar screen whenever I come back from Florida after working the Katrina damage almost for a year, and went down to Florida and lived for almost a year on in St. Augustine off of Anastasia Island, whenever I was coming back to Kentucky to go through another 40-day, 40-night ceremony pertaining to the sword symbolizing peace on earth. Plus, if I had gained that upper level of celebrityism, this was in 2007, I don't think that not only the Kentucky authorities in Land Between the Lakes would have responded and reacted the way that they did, but I don't think that I would have been attacked the way that I was up in Livingston County, pertaining to some idiot deciding, even after I was questioned, interrogated about what my intentions was about telling all these different churches and all these different people that God had shown me that there was going to be electrical disturbances. I truly don't believe that I would have been treated the way that I was treated if I was treated on the front end of all that before 2005, whenever my own people basically attacked me right here in Martin, Tennessee, and tried to make me out to be some sort of potential homegrown terrorist. If Ronald Reagan and the Bushes and the White House and the church communities would have favored towards doing the proper and right thing, other than shoving it off to the side and acting like that it was either a hoax, or that or that it was some sort of a game. I truly believe that from basically from 2005 on is whenever I blamed this community around in here, especially the surrounding Northwest Tennessee area, give or take about 10, 11, 12 counties, going all the way down to Shelby County in Memphis, going all the way down to Dyer County and Lauderdale County and out towards Jackson, Tennessee, and down towards Pickwick, because I couldn't tell you the amount of churches that I left material at. And instead of them looking at it in a positive form, they was going to people like Tommy Moore and trying to put me in the same category as the Unabomber towards me putting out. Now this is the words coming out of a judge here in Weakley County, that they was basically putting me in the category of a Unabomber way before 9/11 and way before 2005, towards putting out demands to the public towards manifestos. Tommy Moore, the judge here in Weakley County, basically said that on the bench in front of my brother and I at the same time. And that I was being looked upon, instead of being the white horseman, I was being looked upon as being the black horseman. Well, who done that? Why did they do that? And how come they didn't have enough sense to be able to interpret the scriptures the way that I had interpreted them years before that? As I said, that was in 2014. So basically from 2005, whenever the Lord really reprimanded me hard and heavy, and I planned a weekend retreat towards going back up in Land Between the Lakes and cleaning out the altar, the original altar that I had built in 1989, and spent so much time up there, praying and fasting and praying for a revival, etc., that after 205, whenever I was attacked right here in my own Weakley County community, from then on, I went through event after event, occurrence after occurrence, more occurrences, more events that almost took me completely down. Even after that, I had come back from Denver, Colorado. This would have been in 2007, and I was handed 2 tickets from Land Between the Lakes of threatening one of their officers, in which, once more, this officer took it the same way as the officer did, or that the government did in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, that if they was going to come back up there agitating and aggravating me again, the way that they did the first time that I was up there in 2007, this was either right before or during the time that they shut the Kentucky Dam down, that God was going to handle that situation in the way that it needed to be predominantly handled. They took those words out of context, misconstruing the intent of the comments, and tried to make it out like that I myself was the one that made the threats. In other words, that I was going to take care of business, that I was going to do what was necessary if they come back up there on top of that hill around that sacred site, agitating and aggravating me and trying to stop me from what God had called me to do. I'm talking about a resistance movement, friends, that started from day one in 1989, of me either losing jobs, losing friends, losing welcoming stances with other churches, getting kicked off of radio stations, and then Secret Service intervening confiscating something that belonged to the ministry that didn't belong to the United States government, and then got thrown back into a mental institution, similar towards what had happened in 1983. You know why? Because they claim that all that stuff under the HIPAA law is supposed to be secretive and that nobody's supposed to know nothing about nothing. But I guarantee you, whenever it comes to the HIPAA law, and whenever it comes to people that's ever been exposed to the psychiatric community, they blow that in the water 10-1 towards you not having no privacy, towards the things that you did be exposed to, if you're the wrong person, towards bringing that up again and again and again if necessary. Now, if you're a doctor or a judge, or you're somebody that just had a heavy load on them that just couldn't handle it, or if you're somebody that got exposed to some chemicals that basically you needed to be dried out and they had to take you down to the ward, to the psychiatric ward, and get you cleaned out, they'll protect those people. They'll protect those people. They'll protect those people's reputations. You know, you got a lot of wives out there that works with ministers that just basically just lost it for whatever reason. Maybe they thought that their husband was involved in a relationship or whatever, and they wound up having to go get some sort of psychiatric help. Well, you won't never hear of any of those episodes. You'll have business consultants. Rather than them jumping out of the window like they did in 1929, they basically go off the deep end. And because of their predominant stance in the community, you won't never hear nothing about that. Just like if you have predominant people that got caught, let's say, funneling their granddaughter or having sex with their stepsister or their stepdaughter, if they're the right person, that won't never hit the papers. Now, you wonder how come the wrath of God, people likes to put it in the category of the wrath of God, which I guess in a roundabout way it is, because God allowing for these things to occur towards the devil coming down the way that he's coming down and bringing this type of destruction into people's lives. You wonder how come that these things are happening to us. It's because we have gotten off beat of being a true born again society over here in America. And it begins with the churches, and it sits on down to the politicians, and now it's contaminated the whole thing. Kind of like what I was mentioning a while ago about the bad apple. You can put one bad apple in 100 apple basket, and that one bad apple will in fact cause the rest of them to go bad. But at the same time, you can take one good apple and put in that same basket with a bunch of bad apples, and how come that good apple can't make that all those other 99 or 100 bad apples get good? Because it goes up against the elements of nature. The elements of nature was designed in a certain way, and Satan has taken advantage of that. Don't think for a second that he hadn't, towards bamboozling and deceiving the nations into where we are today. And that's the reason why that we're seeing all this destruction fall upon humanity the way that it is. And until people either themselves get affected or somebody in their lives gets affected in a direct way, I'm pretty sure that they're going to blow it off. And like that commentator was saying a while ago, that probably 2 or 3 weeks from now, the media will dismount and they'll walk away, and it'll be mentioned a time or two here and there. But because it will be looked upon as being a downer, because it would be looked upon as being a negativity, they'll flee from that and roll over, kind of like a beetle bug, and go to their next victim. And then whenever that occurs, it don't matter if it's a school shooting, don't matter if it's a tornado or a bunch of structures being burnt, whatever, they'll go to that highlight. Once that gets burned out, they'll leave that highlight and they'll wait for something else to happen, and they'll go to it. In other words, they're constantly chasing the next headline. the next big story, the next high ratings. How can we present this to the people? That way we can get the higher ratings and more people be watching our TV program show than somebody else's. What they don't realize, obviously, that they're dealing with human beings' lives. And they have been dealing with human beings' lives, like I said a while ago, ever since that earthquake hit that caused that tsunami that killed about a 500,000 people, and then damaged all them nuclear reactors, and one of them, the way that I understand, is still spewing out radiation into the ocean. Why we want to keep allowing for things to hit us and rolling off like a duck, rolling off our shoulder, is a method that basically Satan has manifested or implanted into people's lives in thinking that this is the proper way to go about doing things. You stay on track with it for a week or two, and then you walk away. And what they don't realize is that the devastation in these people's lives and in other people's lives, it don't matter if it's Waverly, Tennessee, or Eastern Kentucky, or all the fires out west, or other bad events that's happened, not only to us, but to other people, those people still suffering. And some of those people will suffer for years and years, because everything that they had has suddenly been taken from them. They're at the age that they can't start all over again. They're not going to be able to go out here and buy all their little knickknacks and buy all their trinkets and get all their computer equipment and all their TVs and get all their extra shoes and extra purses and extra rings and extra that. By and large, the most part of that stuff has just been flushed down the toilet. And they know it. And they know it. And now they're at their wits' end. And for the TV media monitor stations here in America to respond the way that they respond to a great deal of these catastrophic events, kind of like rolling it away, out of sight, out of mind, because it's too much negativity. It's bringing too much of our children down on a psychological scale. In other words, they're looking at more negativity than they are positivity. Well, I got news for you. I got news for you, media. I got news for you, all your major TV satellite links. They was already looking at negativity way before this ever occurred. All our children in most all our schools, unless they was born with a silver spoon in their mouth towards having a strong family, a financially bonded family, odds are they was already looking at damages. They was already looking at the problems. They was already looking at the stuff that was surfacing, that they thought that the elderly crowd had control over, pertaining to the baby boomers. And come to find out, there wasn't nobody at the wheel. Absolutely nobody at the wheel. And now you have basically stolen not only from the Windmill Ministries, but you have stolen from your own grandchildren, your children and your grandchildren, and possibly your great-grandchildren, because of the non-existent future that they have, other than to get high, be on drugs, and have intercourse with one another. Now that's where we are as a society, and you can either look at that in the frame of mind that it needs to be looked upon.
Now it's gone. It's underwater.
Or you can pass it off and say, well, it didn't happen to me.
From water or nothing left but a foundation.
Feel sorry for them.
Bad right now. Look at this.
And in reality, you really don't feel sorry for them. You may say that you feel sorry for them, but in reality, you don't feel sorry for them. It's only empty words.
Completely cut off.
But then whenever it happens to you, boy, you want everybody else to feel sorry for you.
Impassable. Now, the only way out is by boat or by helicopter. Joining me now from Fort Myers is NBC's Blaine Alexander. So, Blaine, show us around.
Yeah, Katie, unfortunately, you're seeing a lot of what you're seeing right here behind me. This, quite frankly, is just the power of Ian. You know, I spoke with the owner of this business. This was a rental shop. This was a popular place where people would come along this entire marina and really kind of get boats and kayaks and just things to enjoy water activities. And you can see right here how the power of that storm literally just ripped off the front of this building. I want to show you something that stood out to me. You can see right there, that's what's left of a bathroom. You see the toilet there. You see some of the cleaning supplies still in their exact place, while everything else around it is completely decimated. This is really kind of a strong economic place. This is where a lot of people make their money here. I talked to a couple that was walking nearby. They say they've got a nephew's store not too far from here. His entire thing was gone. What really stood out to me, though, in talking to people is that they did not expect it to hit this hard. The owner of this place tells me that he actually really tried to anchor down his kayaks. He tried to secure some of their things, but he came back and he said he had to dig out a lot of his materials because they had washed clear across the street, clear across the road, and were not too far away. Look back here. You see this boat, Katie. This really kind of tells the picture of what you see when you're actually driving down this street. A number of different boats just literally.
And that's probably an average of about $100,000 boat right there. That's a nice. That would be considered on the Tennessee River as being a very, very nice rig.
That's what we're seeing in terms of damage. But what we're seeing in
and that boat, in comparison to the other ones that I've seen destroyed, is peanuts, because some of those yachts and some of them other boats that I've seen, oh my God, you're talking about $1 million, $2 million boats.
Crews, search and rescue efforts. And keep in mind, the water isn't working here. The power isn't working here. So you've got thousands of people still spread out trying to restore running water, trying to restore power. At the same time, there are basic resources here that people don't have. There's no access to bottled water. All of the stores are completely sold out. As we drove down from Orlando this morning, our team and I looked around and we actually saw a number of trucks just kind of carrying small trailers that had pallets of bottled water or gas canisters coming down here clearly to distribute some of the resources that people need to start moving on to that next phase of trying to rebuild. The other thing that we're noticing as well is that, yes, there are not any places for people to go. It's hot out here. We're talking about close to 80 degrees or so without any sort of electricity, without any sort of running water. That's also a concern as people try and help those who are sifting through their belongings here.
And you're talking about people less than a week ago was adjusted to a very, very moderate, pleasant, peaceful lifestyle. And then all of a sudden you're going to turn that upside down. You're going to take all them things that they was adjusted to and pull them from them. All them children that had the games to go to after school and it had stability in their lives. You're going to take all that away, and you're not being no more serious about this other than maybe filming it for a week or two and then out of sight, out of mind, no longer discussing it again and going to the next calamity that hits. That in and of itself to me is cold-hearted. That in and of itself to me is on the level of being insane. Because like I said, it's almost like a doodle bug, a rolling tumbling bug. They'll roll over from one event, and then whenever that event slows down, they'll roll over to another event. Now, I will say this about the people up there handling the court cases with Donald J. Trump and the January 6th deal. They were smart enough to identify, in other words, they smelt a rat in a wood pile, and they basically said, you know what, maybe we better set this one out. Because this one here is fixing to take on mainstream media to the degree that all the limelight is going to be on this situation, and it should be, versus the court situation, and they basically canceled it. They were smart enough to identify what they was going to be fighting up against here pertaining to competition with the ratings, and they said, you know what, let's just cancel it. We'll reschedule it again after everything settles down, and then we'll declare what we need to declare to the American people pertaining to the facts, and we'll either let the American people be their own judges, or we'll let the American people continue to walk around bumfuzzled and deceived and blinded to the point that uh, they won't be a bit more in advance towards the knowledge about January 6th today than what there was now going on 2 years ago. I mean, today's the last day of September. We're soon looking at Halloween in the next 31 days, 31 days. So, I mean, we're right here at the holiday season pertaining to Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's Eve. And of course, what happened after New Year's Eve, January the 6th, 2 years ago? We seen literal hell come undone at the seams at the Capitol building up towards Washington, D.C. That's what we seen. So whenever we continue to get bombarded by all these horrible, horrible, torrential, cruel, and different events, people need to stop and reflect towards just exactly why this is happening. I realize that most of you politicians now are beginning to lean more towards it being science in regards towards what we're doing either to the atmosphere above us or to the earth below us. And that's part of it. Don't get me wrong, that's part of it. But the other factual fact is that God has lifted his hand of protection off of this planet, and he's basically allowing us to see what we wasn't seeing before COVID that now we're seeing now. I mean, whenever you take a society that was that blinded, that they thought that accountability and that judgment day was never going to come, you're dealing with a society that's basically been bamboozled, blinded, or just don't care about the future pertaining to their children and their children's children. You're dealing with a society that literally don't care until something like this happens to them, and then they start crying, "Oh me, oh my! Have pity on me, please. Please, can you send help? Please, can you get money down here? Please, can you get water down here?" Well, did you think about those same things whenever you was watching people suffering? Did you try to go and lend a hand? Did you offer any type of assistance as far as money or donations? Heck, the type of people around here that I've been witnessing, even just with a smaller calamity that hit over in Northwest Tennessee as well as up in Kentucky, whenever the bread basket would come around, they were some of the first ones to stand in line towards wanting freebies, but yet no, they're probably worth $1 million. Ain't no telling how much money they got in the bank. Ain't no telling how much money they got in CDs and DVDs and everything else. Big nice houses, brand new cars. And now you're going down to the bread line towards getting freebies, even though your home and your house didn't get tore up. You don't think that people are going to be judged for that one day? And then on top of that, not only are they taken from the needy by being greedy, but then they're not given to Red Cross. They're not given to any of these other organizations that need help during the time that they need help. But yet now, whenever something happens to them on a big, big scale, they're expecting for everybody to lend their hand and help them out and go out of their way towards making sure that they got water and adequate this and adequate that. Every time something like this happens, it is a strain on our resources, and eventually it will catch up with the rest of us towards either in higher prices, or eventually the products that we was adapted towards getting will no longer be available to get, or you just won't be able to afford to get them. Especially if you combine that with the forces of nature pertaining to the agricultural community, that obviously God is letting the devil have havoc down here upon to the planet. because of various reasons, whenever you don't have enough supply, the demand increases. Whenever the demand increases, usually everything else increases with it. It's really sad how that the greedy continues to be that much more greedier. And I guarantee you, out of the events that what you're looking at right now, there'll be some people that will get stinking, filthy rich off of it. Just like Halliburton with Dick Cheney pertaining to Katrina. Taking the paperwork off of one desk and putting it on another. Paying people to come out there and remove debris for about 17 to maybe $23, $26 a square yard, while he was taking on a contract from the United States government at about $65 or $70 a square yard. In other words, the laborers was the ones going down there. They was the ones sticking their necks out towards their investments. They was the ones wearing out their tires. They was the one wearing out their trucks. They was the one taking a chance on tearing up something or possibly being injured in removing all that debris down there at Katrina. And they're going to have the same situation right here towards debris removal. There'll be all kinds of bad smells and bad looking things that now them people are going to have to become adjusted to for the next couple of years. This is big. It usually takes about 3 to 5 years before you start seeing the scarring of this starting to go away. And of course the landscape will never be the same. There'll be a few of them that'll start building immediately within the next probably 90 days. But by and large, you won't see a massive buildup until a year from now, because everybody will be too invested on debris removal towards tearing down houses and homes that basically the government has declared unfit because of mold and because of everything else. And this will be a long, long process.
Kirsch, you can see the water behind you, Jesse. I heard you say earlier that you spotted an alligator.
Yeah.
There's going to be plenty of alligators. You're in Florida. This is alligator country. This is alligator country. You're going to spot things down there that's going to be... And we talk about the human casualties. We talk about the human life.
We need to have much stronger building codes, new buildings.
We talk about the infrastructure. We talk about all these other problems. But how about all them people's cats and dogs and birds and all the rest of the wildlife animal kingdom down there that had to suffer tremendously simply because of the human activity, simply because of a group of people that got bamboozled pertaining to the OPEC petroleum industry that said, oh no, global warming, it ain't real. Y'all just imagining all this stuff. What's wrong with y'all? Y'all just imagining this stuff.
Think about risk, how we navigate around risk and how we build around it. Is it theoretically possible to build human settlements in these areas that can withstand these hurricanes? Yes, but it's very expensive and requires a real different approach to how we think about infrastructure, how we think about settlements, and all the rest of it.
It's not just Florida and living in a hurricane zone. It's what we see in California and people still building in Malibu, even though Malibu burns down every couple of years. Large parts of it.
I think also really important to keep in mind, it's not just even those places. It's places like Pakistan where they have many, many fewer resources. And that country is still very heavily underwater now, almost 2 months since their massive flooding. So, things look really bleak in America, and they are. This storm is really intense, but there are other parts of the world that are suffering much more intensely already.
Because we have more control over what happens here, let's focus on here, just for the moment at least. FEMA changed its policies for how they were going to insure homes in flood areas. And it's not just a zone now, it's individual policies, and they will decide how prone you are, where you are to flooding. And that's meant a lot of the policies have gone up quite a bit. And the idea was, if you see how expensive it is to insure your home for flooding, you might think twice about living there. The effect was a lot of people decided not to get insurance at all, this additional FEMA insurance.
Yeah, I think that's the sort of dynamic that we're seeing play out across the country. Wildfire insurance, there's been a similar story all across the Gulf Coast with flood insurance, and we haven't really solved the problem. We can't just raise the price a little bit. People feel comfortable going off insurance. They feel comfortable living where they've lived. And if we really want them to be thinking seriously about moving, I think we're going to have to do something a little more aggressive.
From the way people talk about these storms, it seems like the acceptance of climate change is much broader than it used to be. Even just a few years ago, we had the gentleman on from the Cajun Navy talking about how the storms are getting stronger and more powerful, acknowledging that this is different than what it once was. Our awareness of it as it broadens out, is that helping our ability to confront it, to make better decisions?
I think to some degree. I think basically we don't see climate denial anymore, and that means that we can take seriously or try to take seriously many of these risks. But I think in a lot of cases we've sort of replaced climate denial with climate delusion, climate delay. We think this isn't such a big deal. We think we can navigate around it. We think a 500-year storm is still only going to hit once every 500 years instead of once every decade, or in some cases maybe even once every 5 years.
Why are we calling them 500-year storms?
Well, I think it's actually sort of useful to remind us how far from the historical average we really are. I mean, in the US, just in the last couple of months, we've had something like 7 or 8 storms that were either called 500-year or 1,000-year storms. And when you take that number seriously, it's just a reminder that however normal your daily life may feel today, our climate is so out of whack that we're seeing literally millennia of extreme weather condensed into periods of just a few years, or in some cases even just a few weeks.
David Wells, thanks so much for joining us and for calling it what it is and talking about what we can do about it, what we cannot do about it. I appreciate your time as always. And coming up, Ian has made its 4th landfall, this time in South Carolina. We are live in Charleston.
With their Verizon private 5G network, Associated British ports can now precisely orchestrate nearly
out there for a reason. Explain what that means.
Yeah. Well, what they mean is because it's sitting so low, it's more prone to flooding. I mean, these are areas that get flooded on a regular basis. And when you were talking to residents in this area asking how they're preparing for the storm, well, they say they're used to it. They're cleaning out storm drains. They're putting up sandbags in the areas that they're used to. And, you know, when we were last talking, the conditions were much different. I was talking about the tropical storm wind gusts and the tropical storm level rain that we were seeing. You see now the sky's clearing up. The sun's trying to peek out behind the clouds. And the rain, while it's still a little bit here, you have a couple of drizzles. It's just much different than what we saw even just a half hour ago. So back then, that was when we heard from the police department. They said that they were sheltering in place for the time being because of the conditions of the storm. We know that even 2 hours before the Hurricane Ian made impact, we know that nearly 24 roads in this area were closed. Intersections were closed because of what they saw with the wind gusts over the past couple of hours. It looks fortunately like those wind conditions are coming down. We are about 2 hours away from the previous high tide, so we know water in some areas is receding at this point. So positive news so far, but you're still seeing from officials and hearing from officials that they want people to stay inside because we know those bands can still whip around and it's not quite over just yet, Katie.
Shaq Brewster, Shaq, thank you very much. And with thousands displaced, neighborhoods demolished, power out, water contaminated or not running at all, getting people fed becomes a huge logistical undertaking. I heard the Cajun Navy gentleman talking about this a moment ago. FEMA and state governments provide what they can, but in disasters like the one they are seeing down in Florida right now, it's often the little guys who get food to people fastest. And our next guest, you're seeing a photo of them doing that, does just that. Gary LeBlanc is the head chef, founder, and CEO of Mercy Chefs. He's been making food for the hungry in disaster zones for 16 years. He says this is the biggest job Mercy Chefs has ever had to undertake. Thank you so much for being with us. What are you seeing right now?
We're seeing a lot of folks that have lost everything. I mean, it's heartbreaking to see the damage. Roofs gone, flooding in the streets. Even last night, we sent hot meals to one of the shelters, and it was the folks that they had just taken out of Sanibel Island by helicopter. They arrived at the shelter wet, stepped off the bus, and they were greeted with a hot meal. So we're very proud to be here, but these folks have taken a great deal of damage down here. This is devastating. I know that word gets used a lot, but there's not a whole lot of other ways to describe it.
What are you making for folks today?
Tonight, we're doing a beautiful beef and sausage Italian pasta bake with roast green beans, and we're serving that with a fruit glazed tropical fruit compote and a fresh roll. So we're putting out some nice, hearty, healthy, hot meals. We've been asked to feed over 20,000 a day. We're going to ramp that up in the next 2 days to 30,000 meals a day that we'll be sending out here into the community. We're supporting victims, we're supporting volunteers, and search and rescue teams.
It sounds delicious. You started this after Katrina, so you know what you're doing. What do you need to make sure that you can deliver as many meals as possible right now? How can the folks back home help?
Well, you know, it all comes down to our ability to operate very quickly. If we need something, we have to be able to get it. We have one tractor trailer of groceries on site, another 2 coming in tomorrow, and then another 2 on Monday. When you get your groceries by the tractor trailer truckload, you know you're doing a lot of feeding. You're running up a pretty big grocery bill. Folks can find out how to volunteer with us or ask questions in real time or support us financially by going to the website, mercychefs.com.
That's good to know. So you're thinking about 20,000 people a day in this devastation. I know you've seen so much, and you said the devastation gets overused, but it's pretty bad there. Can you help us? We're seeing the images, but can you help us understand the need?
Well, when you lose power, when you lose water, when you lose part of your home, and that happens to people for 60 miles in either direction. You know, a lot of folks don't have cell service. They have no way of getting out. Cars were flooded, and folks are just trapped in the middle of a horrible disaster. And the only way to get them any hope or any compassion is to go right to the heart of the need. And that's what Mercy Chefs does.
We heard from somebody a little bit earlier, one of the volunteers out there, who said that they had not eaten at all yet. How do folks find you if they're hungry and they need a hot meal?
We're posting meal times and locations on our website. They can find it there, or Facebook. Just call and let us know. We're getting phone calls. I mean, some of the hospitals here without power. We're delivering water and hot meals. We're just finding about the need. It's just the phone is ringing, and we're taking care of it in any way that we can.
And what town are you in right now?
We're in Fort Myers,
where it was hardest hit. A final question: why? I know you just started doing this after Katrina. Why did you decide to be the one that goes in and helps directly?
You know, New Orleans was my hometown. I lost a grandmother in Katrina. My daughter lost a home. All the restaurants and hotels that I came up into business when were affected. And I volunteered down there, and I just thought there was a better way to feed people, to do a higher quality meal, to practice higher levels of sanitation and food safety. So that was the genesis of Mercy Chefs, is go serve those high quality meals. You know, we believe amazing things happen over a shared meal, and we're dedicated to doing that with people that have had the very worst day of their life.
Well, bless you for what you are doing, sir. A hot meal does a lot to make a person feel better, and we're glad you're down there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's going to do it for me. Hallie Jackson picks up our coverage next.
I want to back it up real quick to show you something that I took notice of right there.
Good. And
hang on. Whenever I brought up the part about the luxury boats and the bigger yachts and stuff, what you're looking at right there is businesses. You're looking at some of them boats that's been handed down from one generation to another generation towards watermen going out and getting what needs to be gotten pertaining to either fish or crabs or even shrimp or whatever. And anytime you have a hurricane that comes up this massive, not only does it bring displacency to all those people's boats, that some of them may be repairable and some of them may not be, that's going to once more cause a great burden in people's lives, but it also disturbs the Gulf shore, the bed to the point that the very things that they used to rely upon towards being there may not be there. Whenever you have that kind of water churning in, let's say, 10-degree temperatures, or 10 foot of water, or 15 foot of water, however deep, I'm sure they got to go way out there beyond 10 or 15 feet to do what they need to do. But whenever you have this much of a disturbance come up through there, you're not just disturbing the outer layers, but you're also disturbing the inner layers. And there will be lots of mama papa businesses that rely upon fishing and going and getting shrimp and whatever, that they won't be able to make it through this. The devastation will be immensely too bad. And also, the businesses that was relying upon to those squid or those fish or those this or those that out there, a lot of them that didn't even get affected directly with the hurricane will be affected indirectly, because now the areas that they used to rely upon towards having all that stuff won't be there. And in some cases, it takes a few years before it ever, if it ever does, get back to the way that it was, because of the disturbances. Whenever you have a powerful hurricane like this that does that kind of damage, it's not just damaging the outer layers of the land and the things on the land as far as people's homes and businesses, but it's also affecting things going on inside the water that people rely upon for their livelihoods, that now won't be there. So there's so many different angles that you can look at all this to be able to tell that this is just one heck of a massive blow pertaining to the catastrophics. Thank you for listening. Good luck to all of us as we end our program by saying, God bless America, God bless our troops, God bless America's endeavors. Please pray for these people that has been in either in the direct path or the indirect path towards being affected by all this, pertaining to this massive storm that still isn't done with yet, because it could still go up into the hills of South Carolina or North Carolina and put out torrential rains and cause flooding that way. So please pray for these people in this particular situation, and if you can give and help in any way, if you see somebody shaking a can, come during the holidays and you can give, please give. Please help these people if you can help, because you just keep in mind that this could have been you. This could have been you at the wrong place at the wrong time, and now you're suffering, or they're suffering, because of unforeseen circumstances that they didn't have no control over. They didn't have no control over. Thanks again for listening, and shalom.